You have these, right? Yeah, it's okay. That's my neighbor that I grew up with. You know,
Good afternoon.
Hey, Ebony, how are you?
Ms. Keisha, have we met quorum? Good
Yes, we're at
afternoon.
quorum.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I hope that you are all doing well. We are going to call our meeting to order, our March 26, 2025 meeting at 3:02 p.m. But before we begin our meeting, I would like to take a moment to review our goals that guide our work. Finish the job of ending chronic homelessness, prevent and end veteran homelessness, prevent and end homelessness for families, youth, and children, set a path to ending all types of homelessness. These are our goals. Moving along, just some housekeeping. HSAC members, please add HSAC to your name and complete the sign in the chat. Remember to stay muted unless speaking using the virtual hand raise feature for questions. Community development will monitor the chat for questions. And we're going to move to public comments. As of now, we only have one person signed up for public comments, and that is Mr. Chris Noblet. Ms. Keisha, could you confirm if there's any additional individuals signed up?
He's the only one.
Thank you. At this time, we will open the floor for public comments. Each person will have 2 minutes to share. Once the timer goes off, we will have you conclude your remarks. Thank you for your cooperation. Mr. Chris, we will begin with you.
Hey, y'all. I'm Chris Noblet. I'm an organizer with the North Carolina chapter of the National Union of the Homeless. We're really glad that the tent distribution policy is being voted on today. And just wanted to highlight that this whole effort's really demonstrated the power that this body has, especially in advising the city and county governments. Just as like a reminder, it started off how many months ago, like half a year ago, because a single HSAC member sent a memo to the city manager, which resulted in the full halt of the life-saving tent distribution. Y'all have a lot of power when it comes to advising the government, because people are listening to you around policy when it comes to homelessness. And I bet you they don't know about the massive wave of impoverishment that we've been seeing and now is being accelerated, and how the status quo is not going to hold up for that. If you advise the city and county to consider a vacancy tax to both encourage affordable rent prices and to house people, they would listen to you. Right now, people unhoused and housed want solutions and want our leaders to challenge the evil apathy from our state legislature and federal government, and y'all sit in a position to do that. We brought forward last month that Durham has a glut of empty apartments, 82% higher than the national average, 17 per unsheltered person. Y'all might have also heard that there's been a DOJ lawsuit against the RealPage software company and 6 commercial real estate giants who have been accused of colluding to maintain rents at a murderous rate, even encouraging their property managers to maintain high vacancy rates for maximum profits. In an investigation in the largest cities where those 6 companies were, Raleigh and Durham had the 2nd and 4th highest market shares owned by these companies. Our housing market is being run by a cartel. They don't care about if you or I or anyone is able to afford rent, and they certainly don't care if Durhamites are being pushed into the street. In our opinion, those empty apartments should be turned over to the Durham Housing Authority, but you probably don't have that much power. But you could take a much more generous approach and recommend to our city and county governments that we implement a vacant housing tax now and take a stand against the state legislature, which is leaving us all out to dry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chris. Thank you for your remarks. The next item of agenda of approving of minutes, we will not do that in this meeting. I am going to now turn it over to Colin Davis to give us updates about our in-person meetings.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you, Madam Chair. Wanted to let you know that it has been brought to our attention that we are out of compliance with North Carolina public meeting laws as the pandemic and state of emergency have ended. When that pandemic and state of emergency ended, we were supposed to go back to in-person meetings as soon as possible. We didn't have a location that was able to be used at that point in time. So we've been continuing to use electronic Zoom meetings. It is now time for us to return to in-person meetings. And given we found this out literally a week ago. There wasn't enough time to change this meeting to an in-person meeting. So our meetings will begin in April in person, starting with the executive committee meeting on April 4th will be in person at the community development offices. And that's where all of the subcommittee meetings will be at community development, and HSAC meetings will return to the DSS building where they were pre-pandemic on the second floor in the conference room there. We will send out an updated schedule after this meeting with locations and dates. So April, May, and June meetings will all be in person. We will not be able to approve minutes today, and we will not be able to approve the tent policy, as public meeting laws state that no votes or decisions can be made electronically, via electronic vote, via email vote. They all must be done in person. So we will have to table the tent distribution policy until April for an approval. So it gives you an extra month to read the policy. And I will take if there's any questions on it. Go ahead. I see Sharita's hand up, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Sharita.
Thank you, Colin, for this information. I do have a few questions. Let's see, where do I start? So and I'm not saying this to like dwell on it for a long time. I just kind of want to get some answers, right? So whose responsibility is it to inform the body when such a change occurs? That's question number one. Question number two is, in the event we are limited in space for our open subcommittee meetings, can we then have a hybrid option so that folks who may not fit in the room or who don't want to come in person will have the opportunity to participate that are not like members of that subcommittee? And then my third and final question is, how many months has this rule been in effect? And if all or any of our old minutes, if all that stuff has to be gone back to how many ever the months that is to bring us current and into compliance. So those are my three questions.
Sure. So I'll start with your last question. I don't know the answer to that. That's something working with city attorney to figure out if there is stuff that has to be revoted on, or if it's a lot of the things that we voted on are kind of water under the bridge in some form or fashion. In terms of offering hybrid meetings, my understanding is hybrid meetings are not allowed, as that would indicate that HSAC members wouldn't be in person for a vote, and therefore having an electronic and in-person vote would violate that law.
So I was asking that question specifically, like with the understanding that the voting members would be present, but if we had community members who wanted to be a part of those meetings, would they be allowed a hybrid option?
My understanding is we would have to find space where there would be a live streaming capability, where it could be streamed on YouTube, similar to city council meetings. And so that's that piece. And then in terms of who is supposed to notify us, that would be the clerks and city attorneys. And apparently there was a memo that came out some time ago that and we're not and I'm going to say we are not the only public body right now meeting virtually that is going to have to go back to in-person meetings. There are other advisory boards and committees of the city and county that are meeting virtually that this going to in-person has to apply to as well. So we are not unique in this. It's just trying to get everything organized and back in compliance. I don't recall, the city attorney told me a memo was sent out. I don't recall the memo or when it was sent out or when the rule officially started. Based on what I understand, the North Carolina state laws apply only during a declared state of emergency. And so therefore one could make the logical conclusion that when the state of emergency was declared over, that's when in-person meetings were to begin.
Thank you.
You got it.
Reverend Vaughn?
One last question.
Yes, ma'am.
Due to this change, what type of notifications are going out to make people aware? Because we have quite a few people that have joined for years, and so this will be a change.
Yes, it will be a change. So Keisha and I have been talking about that, and we did not want to send anything out prior to this meeting because we didn't want to create confusion for this meeting. We wanted to announce it here, have a conversation. So all of the new information will be posted on the city clerk's website. So links, the Zoom links that have been sent out via email and been put on people's calendars in Outlook. The Zoom link will be taken off and the address of the meeting will be replaced in those meeting invites. So all the meeting invites for HSAC members will be updated. We will send out the full HSAC schedule to the entire continuum of care and HSAC members in addition to that. So it'll be posted on the city clerk's boards commission's website with the location. We will update all the HSAC members' Outlook invitations that were sent out, and we'll send out a PDF of all of the meetings with the addresses to the full continuum of care. And that will go out this week.
And just to add, it will also be on the county clerk's website.
Mhm.
Thank you. Any more questions for Colin related to the in-person meetings? Okay, we will continue with Colin for the Forever Home Durham Affordable Housing update.
So wanted to let you all know, we are making really good progress in some areas and need some help on others. So Hardy Street has 15 units. There are 18 or 19 referrals in for those 15 units. Cedar Trace, as you saw in the email that was sent out on Friday, there are 18 units that are between 30 and 60% AMI units. To date, there is only one person who has submitted an application for any of the Cedar Trace apartments. So if you've applied at Hardy Street, it would probably be wise to also put an application in at Cedar Trace, as there's more than enough overflow at Hardy Street to take some people to Cedar Trace. And Bryan Place, we referred 10 people to Bryan Place to fill those units. 2 people sort of disappeared, faded off. We're in the process of trying to figure out what happened. And there's been a little staff turnover at Bryan Place. So Jeff and the team are trying to figure out what happened, because there's been folks saying, oh, those are UMD units and they're not urban ministry units. The 2 vacancies were given to people who were referred by urban ministries, and the 2 people who referred either chose not to accept or disappeared. And we are now trying to reconcile with the parties involved to make that correct. I saw a question in the chat about Cedar Trace. You would need an HMIS number, so you do need to be homeless. These are referrals from the homeless system. Cedar Trace, these are not the only units at Cedar Trace or Hardy Street. There are a lot more units. So if you've got people who are just low income and not homeless or not part of the homeless system, there is a normal application process that can be put in for any of those units.
Sharita? Sharita, if you're speaking,
I
you're
got
on.
you. Thanks, Madam Chair. So what I do know is that we have a ton of homeless, unsheltered, as well as shelter spaces that are, for the most part, occupied, especially on the family side. And so I'm a little bit concerned as to why we only have one referral for 18 units. and we've done quite a bit of work on trying to make sure that we didn't lose out on affordable housing opportunities. And so I would be curious to know what concerns our providers have as far as like why they're not putting people in the pipeline for such vacancies. Can I ask that question?
You can ask the question. I don't have an answer. It's,
I would be curious to know.
and I will say, yes, Shayna, we did receive an email about DCRC and work with Jeff on being able to access that. There is a way, there will be a way to do that.
I'm not sure if I have met Jeff.
Oh, sorry,
So
we
would love an introduction.
absolutely. There was an email that came from, hold on a second, let me find it. I could
I
have
can
sworn
probably
we-
check my emails.
Yeah, there was an email from DCRC about action.
Yeah, I
Actually,
emailed you and I think Jeff was maybe.
And I
CC'd
copied
on it.
him on it.
Thank you.
Yep. So you should have you should be able to connect through that. Yep. And I don't know if anybody from any of the service providers are on that can answer questions as to why case managers aren't making referrals through the smart sheet. Because
I
know
mean,
Jeff is
I will just
pretty
note two things. One from as the lead group for the landlord engagement. I mean, we have had regular issues with having units available that partners are not picking up that are within FMR for clients to move into. That's certainly been an ongoing challenge. It's something we've raised. Jeffrey's aware of that, and we've had conversations around kind of why that's not happening from some of the partners. I will say in this specific instance, not specific to the property, Sharita, but specific to the world we're in at this very moment, we were fully ready to fund probably all 13 of the units to be housed at Hardy Street because we're still waiting on the federal contracts and the ones specifically that would have funded that where there was capacity that started on February 1st. We've had to just hold until we know what's going on with that. As soon as we have that, I will immediately call and say, hey, as long as we can source some case management support, like we're able to move forward with that. But that's a very specific thing that's going on right now. But there's been an ongoing issue for a long time. We've had units sit waiting before trying to go through the referral process and not hear things. So it's a bit of a head scratcher.
Thanks so much, Russ.
Yeah.
I think
For families moving forward, we and Jeffrey can speak to this better than I can. We have been making referrals. We, I believe, have 3 or 4 for one of the properties and we're the one for the other property.
You are.
So we are consistently making referrals. Now, the process is taking longer than any of us anticipated, but it is also a learning curve for all of us. But we're going to continue to make referrals until we get all of our families permanently housed or rehoused. So it's working, and Jeffrey's been on top of it.
I have a follow-up question. Can I ask my follow-up question?
Please.
So, well, actually, I have 2 follow-up questions. So my first question is, how long will these properties with vacancies be willing to wait on us to know if we have money? So this question is directly about losing access to those units and them going to mainstream. And then what I would say and what I would hope all of our providers, Tasha, Russ, Project Access, any other home and service providers who are making referrals, if these challenges are there, please tell us that those challenges are there so that we can make sure that we're communicating that information up. It would be very unfortunate for us to get to this place and do all this very intentional work at the insistence of our homeless services providers, and we lose, right? And so that's what's at stake right now because we don't know what funding is looking like. I don't know many properties that are just going to let units stay unoccupied when they can get rent from somebody that's not our folk. So I just think we need to be mindful as a system and assist them making asks. We've made some recent asks to our city and county leadership about subsidies and things like that. It's real, it's here, and we need help.
I don't know the answer for how long they will hold these units, but it won't be forever and it won't be that long because they need to get them leased up because these have tax credits in them. And when you've got tax credits, if you don't get them leased, your investors get very upset and they lose their credits. So it's kind of, if we want these, get them in. We are trying to go through the homeless system. We do have people, we are also exploring those 60% units are probably going to be harder to afford for people without a housing choice voucher or some other PSH type thing. So those 60% units would probably be more likely appropriate for somebody with a VASH voucher or a HOPWA voucher if we have people who, because VASH, you're homeless, and the person's experiencing homelessness who are who might be living with HIV and AIDS and qualify. So we are looking at that, but before we go the VASH route and go these other routes, we're trying to maximize all the systems and be able to get folks in and prioritize through here because those VASH vouchers don't have to go to a tax credit property. They can go to any fair market rents. So since these are really low rent costs, those 30, especially those 30% units, you're probably not going to find any 1, 2, or 3 bedroom properties any cheaper than a 30% tax credit in the continuum. And it is important to note that those rent amounts at Cedar Trace are fixed rent amounts. It is not based on a sliding scale income. It's not 30% of your income in a 30%. The rent for a 30% unit is that 30%, is that rental amount. And they are not only 1 bedroom units. There's 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units at Cedar Trace.
Tracy? Oh, sorry.
I'll see if I can cut and paste the chart into the chat.
Yes, I have a quick question. Colin, are the applications and vendor information being vetted through the property management company, or is that by staff, the city staff that's doing the application process?
So it's a little bit of both. We have the application and all the required documents. So anybody who wants to apply applies to us as the coordinated entry administrator through Smartsheet. It involves uploading the Cedar Trace rental application and any documents, bank statements, identification, any documents that they require all gets uploaded. Jeff then goes through and reviews the application to make sure all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, all the paperwork that they request is there and in order from what we can say. Then when we have that, let's say we get 20 of them, then there's a process of deciding which 18 out of the 20 will get forwarded to Cedar Trace. Then we send the packet through Smartsheet to Cedar Trace, and Cedar Trace then opens it. They do their review and run it through their checks and balances system. And if somebody's not eligible or somebody decides they don't want it, then we have a certain period of time to send a replacement referral before it goes back to the market. So it's a little bit of both of us reviewing those.
Okay, thank you for that response, because I'm trying to figure out if, what's the best route. So it sounds like the best route is to go through Jeffrey and your team to kind of start the preliminary process for the application or the lease application.
For people who are literally homeless so for Tracy, for you, if you've got people in your PSH program that are looking to lease up, absolutely put them through this process, because those are 18 units we kind of have a little bit more control over than going straight to the apartment complex and applying through their general system.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Colin.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions before we move back to Colin? Give him a chance to catch his breath.
Yep. There is one other thing I do want to share and put it out there, because this is sort of breaking news and I really don't have a whole lot to share about it. But since we're talking about Forever Home updates, there has been news coming out about emergency housing vouchers. For those who remember, Durham had 68 emergency housing vouchers that were issued during the pandemic. We did not issue all 68 of those because of time of getting people leased up and folks and DHA capacity issues. This may be a good thing because it just came out that HUD is planning to make one final payment on those emergency housing vouchers. Emergency housing vouchers were slated to go until 2030 or 2035, I think 2030. And HUD is saying we're making one final payment that should cover the vouchers through 2025 and most of 2026. So the question is, what's going to happen when those vouchers no longer have funding? I don't have an answer for that because literally this just came out in the last few days, and we've got to talk to the housing authority and start thinking through the strategic plan of what happens when that dollar amount ends. And of course, that's sort of also up in the air with the other. Jeff, help me out. How many households did we have with emergency housing vouchers? I want to say it was 44 actually got leased up.
That's correct.
44. So roughly 44 households are on emergency housing vouchers that will lose that funding stream if there isn't a replacement funding stream, or they can't be converted to a standard HCV. That's something, Jason Brenner, I'm looking at you, my friend, and hopefully you can help us pull together a meeting with DHA to talk through options and what possibilities are there.
I certainly can. Look forward to it. And I reiterate, amplify that even more news came across my desk this afternoon on the EHV front. Colin may share with you, but this is rapidly moving. So as recently as, or as current as today.
Okay. Do you want to share any of that update at this point, or are you still trying to digest?
I'm still trying to digest it.
Okay. All right. We will keep HSAC posted as we work through this. And as always, we are expecting those contracts for the COC projects to come. We're hearing that. I do know somebody in Northern Virginia who's gotten a contract for the year that started February 1st, 2025. The language in the contract is much, much different. The COC contracts are very specific on money cannot be used to assist anybody who is undocumented. So that is a big written change. There's been a way that we've been able to get around it through like a don't ask, don't tell type policy in the past. However, it's clearly stated that there needs to be efforts in place to make sure that no COC grants are used to help anybody who doesn't have legal status in the United States.
Sharita?
I just wanted to make sure I heard you correctly. You're saying that the 44 lease ups that we have run the risk of going away in 2026?
That is what I am stating, yes. That the funding for those housing vouchers will
Gotcha.
go away. And if we don't have a funding source or another housing option, those people are at risk of eviction or returning to homelessness, which then puts pressure on other parts in the system of figuring out what to do. So that flexible housing vouchers that we ask for may need to be repurposed just to keep people safe and need to go from there. So we will,
If we get them.
if we get them. I mean, all of this is happening so quickly and fast that we're trying to sift through and make sense out of what's being said, what's going to happen, how many of these are going to turn into lawsuits that end up dragging the process out longer, and whether or not. And a lot of this is also subject to congressional funding, and the Congress's continuing resolution indicated that there might not be enough money to cover all of the HUD continuum of care recommendations that came out from the 2024 competition. So trying to figure out what that means and how much of a haircut that might mean. There was a piece where I read that it looked like money was being targeted mostly to fund fund to the maximum extent possible renewal projects, which would lead me to suspect any new projects is what they would be cutting. So we'll be having a meeting about that when I get my head wrapped around some of the various things I've been seeing and reading, to meet with the the executive directors of the agencies who were part of the 2024 COC competition, who were recommended for funding, to talk through some options on what happens if there's a 5%, 10% cut, what happens timing wise on those. But the contract that I've seen so far has come in at the amount that was awarded in the competition. So we'll go from there. So just wanted to share those updates globally, and it's kind of all tied to the affordable housing update because subsidies and the units sort of all go together.
Thank you for that, Colin.
Mhm.
And so we'll give it back to you again to talk about the roles of CLC, HSAC, and lead agency.
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Russ had his hands up. I
No,
didn't
no.
see.
I put it up slowly. I guess just a question, and maybe this is just for later. I mean, our HUD contracts are not with the city.
Correct.
They're with HUD. And so, we've already got our council on alert to review for changes and what that means. Which group do we think is going to sit down alongside us and talk about I mean, we could be in a position where in order to sign these, we're going to have some conversation about what the COC policies are, if we're going to keep the money or not. So I'm just curious I think we're going to have pretty quick turnarounds on when we have to sign these. So I don't know if that's planning and policy or where that conversation is going to land on what we will and won't adjust as a community.
I'm trying to get a copy of a contract. I found one, and it sounds like there was a piece where contracts were issued. Then they stopped issuing contracts and are making changes in reissuing.
Yeah, they pulled them. They've had them out for 2 days, pulled them back, and then they put some more back out, but not all of them.
Right. So the one that I've seen was in the original batch that got sent out, signed, and sent back. So I don't know if that contract is going to look the same as the new batch. And that's why I'm a little hesitant to pull that out, because I don't want to have us planning on one thing if the language in the second batch is going to look different.
Right.
So I'm trying to find out when we get that contract and monitoring a bunch of different threads to find somebody who's got an official contract coming out, so we can get the players that be city attorney, county attorney, because the city gets a planning grant out of this as well. So the city is going to have to be weighing in and accepting the money and the same similar terms and conditions as the service providers. So yes, you are correct, Russ. We will need to seek some legal counsel and try and wade through this and determine with legal counsel what we're going to need to adopt or change or not change based on what's in the contract. But it's hard to do it speculatively without seeing what HUD actually has in the language. The one that I did see cross references just about every executive order that's come out on DEI. But then National Alliance to End Homelessness is saying you can't ignore fair housing laws that are federal laws that are still on the books, and discrimination laws that are on the books. So you can't do that. The other pieces of the executive orders are related to immigration status, which also go back to a 1996 or no, not 96. Yeah, 1996 personal responsibility, work ethic thing, talking about where undocumented people are allowed to be assisted by the homeless system. So there's a lot of cross-referencing, a lot of legal documents in the version that I've seen. And yes, we will as soon as we have stuff, we'll be pulling people together to go through it with legal counsel and figure out how we need to move forward in the most appropriate way to maximize our resources. Does that help? Cool. All right. Other questions on all of that? I'm sorry, that was kind of more than just the Forever Home update. Let me go if you want me, Madam Chair, would you like me to move into the HSAC COC?
Yes.
Let me see if I can find this. All right. So we did a training 2 years ago on HSAC COC lead agency, and there was a lot in it. And we were talking and thinking it would be a good idea to sort of go back and do a refresher on COC HSAC roles and lead agency roles in various capacities. So given we've got a lot of funding moving around, we executive committee determined that it would be good to spend a little bit of time in this meeting to go through the HSAC and COC roles in making funding decisions. So that's what this is about. It's not a long presentation, but just talking about who funds the homeless system, the role with HUD Emergency Solutions Grant, the role with the Continuum of Care, and the HSAC role per the interlocal agreement that was set up about 12 years ago. So starting off with the funders of the homeless system, we'll start off with HUD, U.S. Department of Housing Urban Development, and that is the Continuum of Care funds. Those Continuum of Care funds, as Russ shared, do not come to the city in any form or fashion to be given to any nonprofits. Those funds are recommended by the Continuum to HUD. HUD then enters into contract directly with grantees. So HUD would enter into a contract or multiple contracts with Housing for New Hope, Urban Ministries, Alliance, and anybody else who was Project Access was awarded funds, and Family Promise of the Triangle was awarded funds. So HUD would enter into contracts directly with them and enter into a contract directly with the city for the planning grant funds. The state of North Carolina provides emergency solution grant funds. Those funds are funds that come directly from HUD to the state. Those funds do not touch the city government for contracting whatsoever. Again, this is the Continuum makes a recommendation to the state. The state then enters into contracts with the organizations that are recommended and meet their thresholds to obtain an ESG contract to provide a specific scope of work for a specified period of time. The City of Durham, we provide money. Now, this is dedicated housing funds, which are local dollars. Those dedicated housing funds that come in can be used as match for ESG, which we do use some for that. We also use dedicated housing funds to fund things like Unsheltered Coordinating Agency, Coordinated Entry with Diversion, White Flag, Landlord Engagement, and a few other, those are probably the big ones. And the City of Durham is an entitlement jurisdiction, so we receive money directly from HUD for Emergency Solutions Grant. The ESG money that the city funds, the city enters into contracts directly with the service providers, and then HUD monitors the city. HUD does not monitor the sub-recipients of the money that comes out of the city's ESG entitlement funds. Durham County puts money into the homeless system as well, using local funds. I did not include any of the one-time assistance type things like ARPA and other COVID funds that came out. Those are one-offs and are kind of at the end. So these are our primary ones. And then we've got private foundations and donors that contribute to homeless service providers. And the HSAC has a say in a little bit of all of it, except for private foundations and donors. Private foundations and donors are really on their own to determine what to do with their private money and who they give it to and for what purposes and what outcomes. So if we take a step and look at starting off with HUD, the ESG funds with HUD, the HSAC, the continuum of care, is supposed to consult with state and local ESG program recipients in the continuum's geographic area to plan for allocating the ESG funds and reporting on and evaluating performance of the ESG program recipients. So we've got currently most of our ESG funds have been tied up in either emergency shelter or rapid rehousing. And this is state and city money and street outreach. So these are things where the HSAC and COC are supposed to weigh in per the Code of Federal Regulations as it relates to ESG funds. Now, if we move to the continuum of care, the notice of funding availability opportunities, once again, the COC and HSAC are required. The HSAC, keep in mind, is the governing board of the continuum of care. So the continuum of care are all service providers, everybody who has an interest in being here. The HSAC is the governing board. The HSAC are members of the continuum of care and serve as the governing board. So according to the Code of Federal Regulations, the continuum with the HSAC's approval are supposed to design, operate, and follow a collaborative application process for the development of applications and approve the submission of applications to the NOFO. And that is what happens every year in October when that collaborative application is done. It is also important for the continuum of care to establish priorities for funding in those projects. That's where we have meetings in policy and planning to determine should money be prioritized for street outreach versus emergency shelter, or families versus singles. Should new projects be prioritized for permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing or something else? Now, the interlocal agreement is in Section D of the interlocal agreement, is where it spells out what the responsibilities of the Homeless Services Advisory Committee is. And keep in mind that, remember, the HSAC itself is the governing body. And yes, I realize it says 1, 3, and 10. Those are not misnumbered. Those are the numbers under Section D. Under Section D, it's number 1, number 3, and number 10 that apply to funding specifically. So under number 1, the HSAC is the primary decision-making body under the COC and as the collaborative applicant, as those terms are defined in the Hearth Act. Whoops. Those are tied specifically to the ESG state and COC applications. They're tasked with serving as the advisory committee to the governing bodies on all plans, goals, objectives, policies, standards, programs, proposals, and priorities for all homeless services for the city and county. Governing bodies in the interlocal, for those who don't remember, are defined as the city council and county commissioners. So that's what the governing bodies are. The other place is the HSAC is required to review, score, and approve the annual COC application for consideration by HUD for the McKinney-Vento grants. So these are the rules that are in the interlocal agreement, and there's a limitation. The limitation is the primary decision-making body and has specific duties and responsibilities imposed by the COC, the Hearth Act, and the governing bodies. Other than these duties and responsibilities, the committee is an advisory board and shall have no authority to enforce federal, state, or local laws or ordinances and their regulations. And we are not a unified funding agency as defined under the Hearth Act. So when we boil this down, the HSAC in day-to-day roles sets priorities for ESG funds from the state competition, approves the state ESG application and the HUD COC NOFO application, provides budget recommendations to governing bodies, and serves on RFP scoring panels. And those scoring panels are what lead to how local money gets spent within the continuum and where those funds might go when city council and or county commissioners approve contracts that are using local money. The city council and county commissioners can obviously choose to accept or ignore any ideas that come out of the Homeless Services Advisory Committee on that advisory role. They're not obligated to accept all recommendations that the HSAC makes coming forward. So, questions on that?
There's a question from Doy.
Yes, I'm having an issue signing in. I've been having issues with my computer for a while now, from today. I wanted to go back a little bit to ask a question to Cullen or whoever could answer this. But I want to first start off. I want to first apologize about the mistaken article of information I gave the last meeting, in which I seen the header and immediately assumed that the deaths was a result of the homelessness. However, my point still stands that homeless citizens must have adequate housing available unless they voluntarily want to be unsheltered. And that brings me to my first question. There should not be a waiting list for homelessness. Cullen, you mentioned that that they have to be absolutely homeless in order to access correct me if I'm wrong, the homeless services or voucher or any type of financial assistance. But what is absolutely homeless? Because I've had several people contact Entry Point to be referred to shelter in which they were absolutely homeless, had absolutely nowhere to go. Family was restricted in rooming or space that they could put them in, but yet they had to sleep on the floor somewhere because Entry Point stated to them, hey, you're homeless, you have nowhere to go, and life is just messed up for you, but we can't help you because you have to be on a waiting list. I thought that was absolutely egregious and insane that a homeless person who is in desperate need and just down on their luck severely has to be put on a waiting list. So they literally had to bag a person who sold drugs and was in a drug infested environment to sleep on their floor because our county refused to make adequate space for them. So when you say absolutely homeless, what do you mean by that? Because they have a waiting list for people that's absolutely homeless.
Right. All right. Great question, Dorothy. So we've got limited resources. So there's only 29 bedrooms in the entire homeless system for families. That's it. 29 bedrooms. That's it. And there are only 62 beds for men and 15 beds for single women in the homeless system. Once those units are all filled, there are no more emergency shelter beds that we have control over. That's and that's just a fact of building capacity, ways things are designed, and amount of money in the system to be able to do that.
And another concern is the social workers and case managers that these homeless people that I referred are going to are stating to them, it's given like to negotiate homelessness. Like they're telling them like I'm begging to stay with someone that sells drugs or something, and they're like, oh, that's not really homeless. It is really homeless. Really homeless means that you do not have a stable, permanent environment. And if you got to beg somebody because Entry Point is saying we don't have space for the homeless people, then begging somebody to stay at their home means that, if you look up the definition of homelessness, is basically the definition is not a stable, permanent residence.
Well, there's multiple. Yeah, there's multiple.
That's the definition. It's multiple it's multiple everything, right? But what is the actual definition of homelessness? Because they're using a variety definition, but that doesn't make it the correct definition of homelessness. So now that is creating a barrier for our homeless citizens because they have to stay on someone's floor who's selling drugs because they have nowhere else to go because our government is failing to take responsibility to house them. So they're rejecting them from services. So you mean to tell me they can't even get a letter to say they're homeless because you stated that a drug dealer person is a sufficient housing,
Ms.
which contradicts housing.
Ms. Dorothy, thank you so much for your comments, and they are definitely needed. We need to engage with you more, but I don't want us to kind of go off track here. We still have a few more items on our agenda that we need to cover, but again, I don't want to silence your voice because what you're saying is definitely needed, and we need to make sure that we're advocating for our community and the people that we serve. So I'm not silencing your voice, but we just need to get on along with our agenda. I do apologize. Collins, were you going to say anything else before I go to Eliza?
No, I'm good.
Okay, Eliza.
Hey, Colin, I just got into the meeting late and I saw your last slide that said RFP. It was the last bullet. I'm blanking on the language.
Oh, hold on, I could pull it up. Let me see. Pull it up for you. Give me a second.
Yeah.
The slide.
Scoring panels. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The way I understood that is that when the city has RFPs out, we can, as members, serve on scoring panels. Okay, and is that a process that is always activating HSAC members, or when HSAC members request, or that's totally new to me, so I'm just curious about how that's worked in the past.
So in the past, we've used the Performance Management Committee and pulled from the Performance Management Committee to serve on the scoring panels because scoring panels are typically maybe 5 people. And we start with the Performance Management Committee because that's kind of in their wheelhouse of performance management and making recommendations on that, and go through and make sure we don't have any conflicts of people tied to them. And then we have expanded to people with lived experience and other people in the HSAC that are not necessarily members of performance management. So HSAC does have pretty much the whole scoring panel, like community development, the homeless services staff. The only thing we sit on in scoring of RFPs that the city puts out is doing the first review on meeting threshold requirements. And after that, the homeless system and community development are not scoring the applications. It's really the volunteer group and the homeless team serve in a technical advisory capacity. If there's questions in terms of what does this mean, or could this score, the score gives up to 10 points, can I give 2 points, and helping to answer those types of things and interpreting guidelines, but the scoring and facilitating the meeting to arrive at a final scoring and recommendations coming out of that panel.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm distinguishing between the ESG scoring from this, an example could be, just throwing this out there, is like White Flag has an RFP and that would have a scoring panel where HSAC members can serve if they meet that criteria that you shared.
Yeah, we sort of do the same process regardless of funding source. It's coming from we start with the Performance Management Committee, which is made up of HSAC members and COC members.
Sure.
So we start there, and regardless of whether we're doing a COC NOFO scoring application, in a state ESG, city ESG, dedicated housing funds, that's how we in the homeless system, we use the HSAC to score the applications that come in.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And we do pull from policy and planning at times. I know Sharita's served on scoring panels in the past as well.
Are there any other questions? Okay, we'll allow Colin to take his breath
The one other thing I did need to share, as we're talking about funding decisions, as you know, we are looking at RFPs to come out. We are anticipating releasing the RFP that we've been talking about for quite some time with that included unsheltered coordinating agency, coordinated entry with diversion, and white flag. It's one RFP, multiple scopes of work. We were informed that we are removing the unsheltered coordinating agency from that RFP. So we're in the process of making edits to this. The RFP that will be released will include coordinated entry with diversion and white flag only. So we will have that as soon as we get it through final revisions, will be released in April sometime.
Okay, we are moving. Ms. Dorothy, do you have a question regarding what he's just mentioned?
Well, I just wanted to quickly ask as a quick question, why wasn't it permanent, how, I don't know if it's a subsidy or it was the units, why wasn't it permanent, as if they assumed that they would need temporarily housing, like that you said it would run out a certain amount of time, but why didn't they make it permanent, as if they assumed that people will only need temporarily housing for a certain time, like as if they would never need housing throughout their life? Why was it permanent? Why was it temporarily instead of permanent? That doesn't seem logical.
You're asking about the emergency housing vouchers?
Yeah, why wasn't it permanent? Why did they make it temporarily?
I don't know. That was a HUD decision when they issued that. They put it out during the pandemic. And when they put it out in the pandemic, they said these would be good for X number of years. And the hope was future Congresses would renew the funding for that.
Oh.
And here we are now with a Congress who's not choosing to renew funding for that anymore. So
yeah, that
when you're dealing with federal money, it comes down to what Congress wants to do and will allow people to do.
Okay, I didn't understand why. That didn't seem very intelligent for them to put it temporarily, as if these people didn't need permanent housing.
It was all part of the COVID response, is where those emergency housing vouchers came out of. And they saw it as a temporary fix to get people into housing, out of homelessness into it, that were impacted by COVID. That's all I can share at this point. I don't know all the other logic.
Okay, Sharita?
Colin answered it.
Okay. Well, we're gonna, Colin, do you have anything else?
No, I think Erin Mills joined us.
Yes.
She's our city attorney. So since I shared about the public meeting rules, I think I answered the questions that came up, but since the city attorney is here, she might be able to answer any other questions that have come up regarding the in-person meetings.
In-person
Questions about that. And I do see a question in the chat. Question about RFP, will case management. Case management is not part of this RFP, as we don't have funding. So Julia, your question is about flexible housing vouchers and supportive services, I think. That is not in an RFP yet because funding has not been determined. That's part of the FY26 budget process that the city is currently in. So we'll know about that after the city budget is adopted, whether there's money there for that or not. And we would go through a procurement process to award those. The unsheltered coordinating agency that was done by Housing for New Hope, the funding for that is no longer going to be part of this RFP. So all the UCA duties are being reassigned elsewhere. And I don't have details on any of that yet, except for it is not going to be part of the current RFP that's going out. As I receive more information, I will be sure to share it as more details become available. But the RFP that's coming out will provide coordinated entry with diversion and white flag. I hope that answers and clarifies.
Okay. Thank you for that. And we do want to acknowledge our city attorney. Does anyone have any questions before we move to Policy and Planning Committee report for our city attorney? Okay. Sharita?
I was just getting ready to just raise my hand.
Okay, go ahead.
I know I asked some questions before. Did I ask of Colin? And I think the one that I have a question about was it. So I asked several questions, Madam City Attorney. I was curious about how many months we've been kind of not following what the rules were. And if that was going to impact anything we had done in that time frame. And then my other question was, if our meeting is, if we're moving to in-person meetings, but let's say we have people of our continuum who can't be physically present but want to participate, would we be, and I think Colin kind of sort of answered this, he said we had to do some kind of live stream. Would we be able to offer hybrid to people in the continuum or concerned citizens to be able to be a part of the meeting if they couldn't physically be present? Those are my questions.
So good afternoon, everyone. I apologize for my tardiness. I had a meeting prior to this, which held my attention. So I do apologize, and I'll just introduce myself briefly. My name is Aaron Miles. I'm one of the senior assistant city attorneys with the city of Durham. And one of the roles that I serve is representing the community development department, among others. To answer your first question, North Carolina public meeting laws allowed during the time of emergency orders for the meeting of having meetings remotely. When that order was lifted, and those orders do come down at different times, but the one that primarily put a lot of meetings, such as HSAC's meetings, in place were the COVID emergency orders. When those orders were lifted, all public meetings were supposed to resume in person. Now, with that, I'm not saying that anything that you all have done in the last in the time period you haven't been meeting, I'm not going to make a determination on whether or not those were improper. I think if we can go ahead starting in April and get those meetings back in person and get in compliance, I think we'll be fine moving forward. So that's why we raised the flag. Once we were notified, our office does not staff every board or commission. When we learn of things, we inform staff, and therefore by way of staff have informed you all. So moving forward, the meetings will just need to be in person. For the hybrid question, all business will need to be conducted in an in-person format. Now, a live stream can occur similar to how council has a live streaming event, and we do have, at times we'll have community participation, like community comment can occur both in person and virtually. I think that is appropriate. You would need to be in a space that could allow for that type of technology to have that. But for participation in the meeting, for business, if there's an HSAC member who is not able to be present, so for business purposes, all the business would need to be in person. So like an HSAC member could not participate virtually. They would need to be in person, but you could have the community members say, if you wanted to receive comment, that could be received in a hybrid type of format, but all business would need to be in person. I hope that answers your question, Ms. Sharita.
You did. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dorothy, do you have a question for Attorney Miles?
Yes, my first question is, if we needed, how do we need to go by requesting eminent domain to meet the needs of the homeless folks in our community? I apologize for that.
So our eminent domain power is used for lots of different things. That's something that you all as HSAC can discuss. How to go about requesting that. That power is executed by the city council. So that would, you need to have very, very specific request for what that is. It's a very highly scrutinized process, very legally complicated process, and it's only used in certain instances. So if that's something you all are interested in, I'm happy to come to a work group and provide some additional information about what that process could look like. But it's complicated, Ms. Dorothy, but I'm happy to come to maybe a work group and provide some additional context of what that could look like for you all, if you would like.
Thank you. I think that would be helpful. Okay. I don't see any additional hands.
Hi, my
Ms.
hand
Hill, I
is
think,
up.
has a hand
Janine.
up.
You probably can't see it. Janine Hill.
Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon,
I
everyone.
apologize.
It's okay. Hey, I just have a quick question in regards to the hybrid and in-person meeting. So if a member, so given the two options, I know all business needs, you need to be in person to conduct business, but if you're hybrid, can you still attend hybrid, but you just wouldn't have any input? Is that the other option?
So if you
Voting
were
power
to
or what have you?
if you were to watch on like a Zoom format, for example, but you weren't at the meeting as an HSAC member, you couldn't participate in the meeting outside of just providing general comment because you weren't present at the meeting. So you couldn't participate in the official functions outside of providing community comments. You'd be attending as a community member.
More as a community member and not a member?
Because you would need to be in person to conduct the meeting. You can't, the meeting itself, the business would need to happen in the in-person format. You couldn't have someone on a virtual format participating at the in-person meeting outside of a community comment type of situation.
Okay. All right, thank you so much.
Russ?
Aaron, this is going to seem like an odd technical question, but I'm just curious. What's the difference between general comment and public comment? And part of me is asking because before we were in person, back when we were in person pre-COVID, like the board sat at a table. At that point, I was not actually appointed, so I was at there was a set of seats for staff, set of seats for the public, set of seats for the COC agencies that weren't on the board. And one of the things that I think's happened while we've been online is we're having it happen today. It happens a lot of times. City staff will just kind of start commenting from the side, or public will start coming from the side and asking questions. And it can get hard to do our work at times because we're trying to make sure everybody gets responded to. So if we go into this hybrid format, like really what's the difference between public comment and general comment? If somebody who's not on the board wants to say something mid-meeting, does that mean it needs to be handled as like public comment per our bylaws?
So generally public comment and general comment are kind of handled the same in a public meeting context. So I mean, the best way to handle that so that you all could handle business would be you could have like agenda items, and you could have a time for each agenda item. If you all would like say this is the time for individuals who are not members to provide their comment, ask their questions, or you could have your conversation or discussion first and then have them comment on that item. And probably I would suggest adding kind of a comment period during each item. And then you could also have just a general comment period as well, or a general public comment period as well. That way you can continue to conduct your business, but also provide the opportunity for those who would like to comment on each of the items that you have on your agenda.
That's really helpful. Thanks. That's a great idea.
And the way Russ described that room setup is the way the in-person meetings will go back to. The HSAC members will sit around a table. There'll be a staff table. Then there'll be chairs around the outside perimeter to watch. So think of city council or county commissioners where the board is sort of sitting at a table and everybody else are observers. That's the way the in-person meetings work. We've gotten very loosey-goosey on Zoom. It's allowed for a lot more interaction and conversation to happen, and it's also, which is a good thing. It's helped us to move in a different direction, but it's also kind of takes us down rabbit holes at times as well. So, and we do need to organize and follow standard Robert's Rules of Orders and comply with public meeting laws.
All right, we'll take one more question. Sharita?
It's more of a comment. I wanted to just add to that. I think what I remember what we used to do when we would start, we would have our public comment section. And then once we would go into business, if I'm not mistaken, the only time like a non-member could provide any additional context is when like one of the members of the body wanted feedback or clarification from a project or something like that. So as we get ready to move to these new back to our old format, I would definitely want to be clear on how we're going to do that. Because my policy and planning meeting is coming up soon, and I don't want to not follow the process.
Thank you. And thank you again, Attorney Miles, for being here to answer our questions. This was very helpful. We hope that you're able to come back and continue to work with us to make sure that we're in compliance. That is our goal, is to be in compliance.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna move to Sharita for Policy and Planning Committee quarterly report, and then the tent distribution. Of course, we're not voting for this today. So I'll turn it over to you, Sharita. We have about 17 minutes. Okay.
Well, I see that you have another item on your agenda. Following my, unless we had that conversation, I don't think we have, the COC Collaborative Application Project. So I'm hoping that I won't take up all of the time so that we don't run over.
Yes.
So hello all. This is the policy and planning update for this quarter. Since our last update, we have been very busy. Of course, we continue to monitor our unsheltered numbers in conjunction with coordinated entry. Our most recent numbers this week were 36 unsheltered families who've called coordinated entry in need of shelter options, and 103 unsheltered single individuals. Just want to lift that up to keep us true to our mission and our goals, trying to serve these folks and get these numbers down. We have been doing a lot of work around monitoring the unit availability for the Forever Durham units, and Colin presented on that in this meeting just earlier today, and we had a conversation about that. So we have heard the concerns of the continuum of care, and we have tried to be responsive in making sure that we get that information out to you guys. And I know it's taken a while, but it feels like we're moving now. Okay. We have reviewed the proposal from the Pre-Shelter Joint Task Force. I know that's not the name of the task force, but I tried really hard to remember that name. And we provided, we did uplift and bring to the body some of the items that we thought should be highlighted from that report, and we presented that to HSAC and voted on that accordingly. Policy and Planning also submitted a mid-year exigent need funding request. I don't know if, Madam Chair, you've gotten that and if that's gone out. So maybe Colin and Ebony, you guys can fill us in on that. And then the last and very time-consuming, but I think very rewarding experience is that we have worked and convened a robust group and process to develop a tent distribution policy that I thought and hoped that we would be able to present to you today. But as Colin has informed us about meeting standards, the process that we thought we were going to be able to use to be able to bring that before the body today cannot be utilized because we'll be in violation of the North Carolina public meeting rules. And so our hope is that We will get those documents out to you after a review in our policy and planning meeting on April the, I'm sorry, I don't have the date in front of me.
We've sent those documents out to the full HSAC, Sharita.
Oh, you have? All right, well, you guys have it. We will be vetting that and discussing it in the policy and planning meeting for April. And then the hope is that we will be presenting in our April full HSAC meeting a document for HSAC vote and approval or disapproval.
And we did have Madam Chair, the poll. We couldn't call it a vote, but there was an electronic poll that was done on the policy, if you want to share the results of that. Not an
So
official
the,
vote, but it was the poll.
So we did what we had agreed on in our last policy and planning meeting. We didn't have the policy before us at that meeting, was that we would get it out as soon as we got it from our facilitator after it had been updated with the most recent set of comments we had gotten, and that we would do a email vote, review and vote of that policy. The policy was on vote, and I don't have those numbers in front of me because I didn't write it down in my notes, because I didn't think we were going to talk about it because it didn't count. But it would have been, had we been able to follow that process today, we would have been presenting a tent policy to you all, for you all to vote and make a decision on whether we were going to accept it or not in this meeting. And that will now be pushed to our April meetings. And that concludes the policy and planning.
Sharita,
Wait, one thing. One of the things that we've been, there were some earlier conversations about board membership, who's on, what's vacant, what's available. We did just recently look at our policy and planning numbers and looked at our COC liaisons and realized that we are out of compliance. So Colin, did it go out? So we do have 3 vacancies for COC liaisons to the policy and planning subcommittee. I don't know. I can't speak for performance management, but if you are interested in having one of those COC liaison seats, please apply. We would like to fill those slots as soon as possible.
That's just sending an email to the Durham Opening Doors expressing interest in joining, and then the executive committee will appoint.
Russ.
Just curious, as since we're going in person, that may affect some attendance and stuff. Do we also need to do a review? Because part of, if I'm remembering correctly, the governance document limits COC liaisons to serving for 2 years on a committee. And I think we may be out of compliance in a couple of cases with that. I know I had to rotate a couple of years ago on one of them. So I just didn't know if, as we go into being in person, figuring out we may have to figure all that out just to make sure we keep quorum. I'm a little concerned with that shift. We're going to have a hard time hitting quorum. We want to be able to keep doing work and keep moving forward.
We're in the process of, Keisha and I are in the process of reconciling and figuring out everybody's start and appointment dates and going back and trying to true it all up.
I'm sorry, you all. That concludes my report. I didn't know if there were any other questions other than Russ's questions. And we will work on that, Russ.
Sharita, I'm not sure if you wanted to go on record with the vote, but I did find the email. There were 6 yes, 3 no, 2 abstain, and then 2 pending votes.
Thank you very much, Ebony, for that.
Yeah.
So we will bring the tent distribution policy to policy and planning meeting on the 14th. We will do the vote appropriately, and we will move forward and hopefully have one. I think our exact meeting's on the 26th, 23rd. 23rd.
Yeah. Yes. Anthony had agreed to let us have his time, so if we need to continue with the 10th conversation or anything, all policy and planning, you still have time. Are you shaking your head no?
I won't entertain any questions, but if we don't have any questions, I think we can move to our next item on
Okay.
our agenda.
You have any questions for Sharita? Comments? If not, Anthony, we may have time for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I am here today to provide summary results of our first semi-annual performance evaluation for 2025. So I'm going to share my screen and promise that I'm going to try to get this done in the next 5 minutes. So 1 second. Okay. So just a quick overview of the Performance Management Committee activities that led to this report today. Back in December, the committee worked with providers and reviewed and approved the 2025 system measures, performance measures, I should say. And then in January, we approved the 2025 scorecard. We put out the semi-annual performance evaluation in February. And so we are in the process of concluding that effort. And so that's what you'll read more about today. I will have more details next month. But today we're going to give you some summary results. So in February, we released the scorecard. We this year included emergency shelter and street outreach along with the typically evaluated RRH and PSH projects. So this was the first year that we expanded beyond COC funded to emergency shelter and street outreach projects in the Durham COC to kind of see how those projects were doing. Agencies were given an opportunity to turn in self-evaluations, meaning that they got to evaluate themselves using the exact same tool that the lead agency would use. On March 3rd, we then followed suit, Ricky, Malcolm, and I. This particular performance evaluation, the first of the 2 in a year, is for information only. So we did not engage a broader committee to do it. It's just a staff-based committee. The second one where we rely on those results to prioritize the applications for funding competitions is the one where we get performance management and other HSAC folks involved. So we did our evaluation. We provided those results to the projects. And then the Performance Management Committee as well also got the results. And so we're talking today about those results. Today, again, are summary results, and we will give greater details in April. So we had 19 projects evaluated. Again, they range from emergency shelters, which are the ES, to street outreach, which are the SO, and then rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing. So on a grading scale similar to school, this is how we fared in these summary results. So we had 5 of the projects, 5 of the 19 got A's, 5 of the 19 got B's, 5 got C's, 3 got D's, and 1 got an F. And you can see the types of projects below at the bottom of this table. Under the F, that was a DVRRH project that was reallocated to another agency. The average score for the A's ranged from 93 to 98. For the B's, 80 to 88%. Cs 71 to 73%. So I just wanted to point that out. All right. We also issued report cards this year. We thought it would be a kind of cool discussion point as we launched into these conversations with providers. So this is just a sample of what agencies received. They had their name here. Oops, sorry. Their project type, and then the score summary based on the project type and the overall grade that they received. If notes were necessary to improve performance, we included those at the notes section at the bottom, and then we use those to have conversations with our agencies. So this process was supported by office hour sessions, both throughout the evaluation process to support it, and then also again to deliver and discuss the results. The performance improvement threshold requirement was 57. So that means that anybody that got below a 57, we would be required to put them on a performance improvement plan. There was only one agency that got below that threshold, which was the agency that you saw that scored the F, but they don't need a plan because their funds have already been reallocated for the future year. So that PIP threshold is calculated at 65% of the highest scoring COC funded project. So in that case, our highest scoring COC funded project was 88. When we multiply that by 65%, we get a 57. So only one agency got below a 57, and therefore no performance improvement plans are required this year. Again, we have talked to all of the projects. We have also been involved in providing technical assistance. That looks like the projects getting the opportunity to compare the scores they gave themselves with the scores that we scored for them. And then we discuss any discrepancies and reconcile them. Project staff have provided robust feedback on the tools and in the process and preparation for future revisions. And so we will provide more details at the April meeting. And that's where we can talk specifically about, what projects scored what, and some of the pathways to making improvements will occur. We do have one additional office hour session scheduled for, I believe it's this Friday. So if you are an agency on here and have not attended one of the office hour sessions, we encourage you to come. I think there's only one or two agencies that we have not talked to so far. So if you're here, we encourage you to come to an office hours. The last one I think is Friday. So that's my report. I'm happy to take any questions. I think that was it. Happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Anthony? Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Okay, well, it is 4:30. I have a few announcements. As we have mentioned throughout this meeting today, that our remaining HSAC meetings, along with the committee meetings, will now be in person. Those reminders are at the bottom of the agenda, but I'll read them very quickly. Also, Colin and Ms. Keisha will also work together with updating our calendar invites to make sure that everyone knows where the locations are. But our next executive meeting will be the first Friday, April the 4th at 10 to 11:30. Next policy and planning meeting is April 14th from 10:30 to 12. Next performance management committee is the second Thursday, April 10th. And at 10 o'clock until 11:30. And our next full in-person HSAC meeting will be April 23rd at 3 p.m. So please take a look at your calendar invites to determine the location. So we don't vote to end our meeting. So we just hope that everyone have a great day. Thank you for your work today. We enjoyed our meeting. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Everyone.
Have a great week.
Thank you. Have a great week.